On today's show, Tough Mudder released the rules for World's Toughest 2017 and then unreleased them. A big change to the requirements to get your 24-hour World's Toughest Mudder finisher headband. And I've got the best theory about where World's Toughest 2018 will be held that you've ever heard. Seriously. It's great. All that and a talk with Darth Vader. This is the World's Toughest Podcast. Welcome to the World's Toughest Podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's World's Toughest Mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the World's Toughest Podcast. Welcome to the World's Toughest Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email me at willhicks@gmail.com or leave a review on iTunes. There were great reviews on iTunes this week, guys. Thank you very much. I appreciate the feedback. This week, there is literally too much Tough Mudder news. I'm not joking. Our guest today is Darth Vader. We're going to talk to him in a minute. That is his real name. We talk about it in the interview, how he got the name Darth Vader. Darth is closing in on 100 events and will be at World's Toughest in Vegas this November. But before we talk to our guest, there is a ton of Tough Mudder news. Here is what we're going to talk about. I'm not going to go into details on every single item. Some of them I'm going to talk about. Some of them I'm just going to give you the headline. You can find more information on our Facebook page, facebook.com/World's Toughest Pod. Seriously, if I went in depth on all of these news things we're going to talk about in a minute, we would be here for like an hour and a half. And is that what you want? Actually, let me know at willhicks@gmail.com. Why do you listen to the show? Tough Mudder news or World's Toughest interviews? I would appreciate the feedback. willhicks@gmail.com. Here is the news. Tough Mudder sent an email to those that registered for World's Toughest 2017, and it caused a bit of a stink. There were some misspellings and some conflicting rules. There was some stuff that looked like it might have been copy and pasted from the Toughest Mudder rule book. And there was one huge change that riled people up. We're going to talk about in a minute. Something that was included was an official announcement of the hours of this year's race. They ended up pulling the rules offline, and I'm sure they're making those fixes and corrections, and they'll be back up soon. They have not been up. As I'm recording this, they're still offline. The big change that caused the most controversy is with the two-man team division. Up until this last week, Team HQ has said there will be two separate but equal team divisions. The first team category is the two-man team category. This is what they had last year. This is a category that John Albin and Ryan Atkins won last year. The two-man category this year was supposed to be identical to last year with the exception of the prize money. I'll talk about it in a minute. The second team category would be the four-man plus, I say four-man, four-person, four-plus national team relay category. They put a lot of push behind the national team relay category this year. A lot of announcements, a lot of press. They have awesome national team bibs. They look great. As far as prizing, last year there was just one team category. It was two people or more. Most of the teams were teams of two people. The money that went into those awards last year, the top 5 places paid out last year. They kind of shifted it around and moved it into the two team categories, the two-man and the four-man category. And the top 3 places were both going to pay out in both team categories. In the announcement they sent out, you know what, let me just read it. Due to high levels of interest in the exciting new national team relay category, and with the desire to constantly evolve and improve the overall event, we've removed the prizing money from the regular 2+ team category and shifted prize money to deepen the overall pool for the national team relay. With over a dozen teams from countries around the globe already registered in the national team relay category, we're expecting this competition to be a fierce and exciting new addition to this year's event. Now, this does not mean the 2+ team category is going away, and as always, we will support and encourage athletes declaring and running as a team. The spirit of this event has always been one of teamwork and shared brutal suffering, whether running alone or with your drinking buddies. So, several of the guys have been training like crazy, planning on running in the two-man category, and they're very upset, understandably, with the change. Miguel Medina has been planning on running it with Mark Jones. You might remember Miguel talking about this on an earlier episode when we recapped the Chicago Toughest Mudder race. Miguel and Mark both earned their elite contender status at Toughest Mudder this year by finishing in the top 5 at one of the races. And they were heavily favored. They are heavily favored to win the two-man team category. Miguel wrote an open letter to Will Dean and TMHQ. You can read it on our Facebook page, facebook.com/World's Toughest Pod. Another bit of news that came out of that announcement or that letter from TMHQ is we know the start time, 12 noon, just like last year. 12 noon on Saturday to 12 noon on Sunday, with a little change, with a big change on the headbands. This is also from that same announcement. Remember that pesky last lap requirement that we put in place last year? Actually, they put it in place 2 years ago. Having to finish a final lap after 12 p.m. on Sunday, which meant that hundreds of you ended up dragging your tired butts around the course one last time before camping out 100 meters from the finish line while waiting for the stroke of noon. Yeah, we remember that too. Though it was glorious and heartwarming to our blackened souls, we've relaxed the requirements slightly. To be considered a 24-hour finisher and eligible for top prizing and the coveted 24-hour headband, competitors must complete their last lap between 8 a.m. and the official close of the finish line at 1:30 p.m. Sunday morning. Like any respectable traffic engineer, our goal is to minimize backups and increase the efficiency of the overall transportation system. We're widening this window of time to allow all athletes the opportunity to complete their final lap with style and grace, as opposed to huddling in a large group waiting for high noon. 24-hour headbands will still only be distributed at 12 p.m., at which point the start line closes and no new laps may begin. This is actually really similar to the way they distributed the headbands for Toughest Mudder, the 8-hour race. Basically, to get a Toughest Mudder headband, you just had to finish a lap and be at the race for the full 8 hours in a pit area or on the course. And then just after 8 o'clock, you could go over. There was a tent they had set up. You turn in your timing chip, and they'd hand you your patch, and they'd hand you your 8-hour headband. So, summarize that one more time. The race is going to start at 12 o'clock, noon, on Saturday. Once you finish a lap after 8 a.m. Sunday morning, you are an official finisher. You don't have to go out for any more laps. If you want to, you can be done at 8 a.m., which is 20 hours. So you might as well go out for one or two more. At 12 noon on Sunday, the start line closes. You can't start any more new laps. And at 1:30 on Sunday, 1:30 p.m., you must have completed your last lap for it to count in your mileage totals. So your race can go as short as 20 hours or as long as 25 and a half hours if you want it. Last weekend was the first Tougher Mudder Regional Championship race. Top 10 men and women qualified for the Tougher Championship race on November 4th at SoCal. Top 10 in order for the men. First, Ryan Atkins. Second, Ryan Kimpson. Third, Victor Casada. Fourth, Van Tran. 5, Ryan O'Connor. 6th, Forrest Boge. 7th, Edward Zaprowski. 8th, Christopher Mendoza. 9, Matt Lister. 10, Jason Harley. And for the women, in first, Anne Champagne. Second, Aaron Sonjid. Third, Brittany Heiniger. Fourth, Krista Dustman. Fifth, Sarah Langone. Sixth, Deanna Braz. Seventh, Stephanie Grunberg. Eighth, Fern Ryder. Ninth, Adrian Alvord. 10th, Kelsey Cummings. Congratulations to those top 10 men, top 10 women. We should see a lot of them in SoCal in a few weeks. Tough Mudder released the schedule for Toughest Mudder 2018. Not World's Toughest, Toughest Mudder 2018, the 8-hour race. There are 6 Toughest Mudder races, 5 of which are in brand new locations. There will be Toughest Mudders in SoCal at a brand new venue, Central Texas, Michigan, Scotland, England, and Boston. No Toughest in Canada, at least so far. I'll talk about that in a minute. With the new Toughest locations, they have also released new rules for Toughest Mudder. Contender status for 2018 will require 30 miles now, instead of the 25 miles that was required in 2017. They've also released the 2018 Tougher Mudder Championship Series schedule. 5 races, including a European championship race. The first 2 episodes of Road to World's Toughest Mudder are now available on Amazon.
In the world of obstacle course racing, there is one race that is the ultimate test. World's Toughest Mudder.
There's a link on our Facebook page at facebook.com/World's Toughest Pod. The most recent episode is about Ryan Atkins and Lindsay Webster as they train for World's Toughest Mudder.
It's almost like summer camp where, you know, you're a kid and you go to summer camp and you meet this fabulous cabin full of like fun people and you make best friends and stuff and you do everything together and you have this cool experience, and then you come home and nobody really understands like what you've been through and this great time that you've just had.
I am like 90% sure I know where World's Toughest Mudder will be in 2018. Later on, I will tell you where. All right, that's late enough. It'll be in Atlanta. So I say that. So I'd finally come to terms with World's Toughest being held in Atlanta. And then Tough Mudder released a list of the requirements for the World's Toughest site for next year. Here's an excerpt of what they said. Unless you've been living under a rock for the past year, you have heard rumblings about the possibility of a venue change for last year's World's Toughest Mudder. Okay, time out, hang on. First of all, they announced that, like on their official Tough Mudder Twitter. So we know that. There's no rumblings. We know that. Though we can neither confirm nor deny such rumblings at this time, we already know that. It's okay. We will take this opportunity to take a page out of the Amazon headquarters search announcement playbook and tell you what requirements we may be looking for if these rumblings happen to be true. They've already announced it. This is the last year in Vegas. There's no need to be coy, fellas. They listed 8 different requirements in their email. Here are the 8 requirements. 1. Minimum 500 acres of usable space with varied and unique terrain. Okay, that makes sense. Almost any venue they go to right now could qualify for that. Must be within 60 miles of a major metropolitan center and or international airport. Oh, the airport, huh? I've talked about the Atlanta airport enough. Number 3, must have 200 acres of terrain with dig capacity containing soil with a minimum of 1.33 grams / cubic centimeter density and 50% pore space. Yeah, totally. The 4th requirement they have listed, water. Lots of water. Okay, that makes sense. Number 5, must encompass terrain which during nighttime hours can be described as spooky, ethereal, mystical, scary, or so dark I can't see my hands in front of my face. This is exactly what I was talking about with the Atlanta course. There was a point when I came out of the woods in Atlanta into a field with like pea soup fog. I felt like I was running through the X-Files. Number 6, must have a minimum 1 natural feature which can be turned into a badass WTM-only obstacle. Currently accepting castles with moats, and or multiple trebuchets, oceanfront piers, glacier-fed lakes, or naturally occurring hot springs. Okay, Atlanta has none of those. The castle thing is clearly a red herring, and let me tell you why. Toughest UK is held at Belvoir Castle. They're trying to trick us into thinking like, oh, they're going to the toughest UK location. But we're not falling for those shenanigans, Team HQ. The other 3 things they listed, oceanfront piers, glacier-fed lakes, or naturally occurring hot springs. They're not going to hold it on the ocean. That's just not going to happen. I know Battle Frog did their 24-hour race by the ocean. Do you think Battle Frog's coming back? But Tough Mudder's not going to do that on the ocean. The other 2, glacier-fed lakes. Where are glacier-fed lakes? Alaska? No. Canada. Another red herring. It's clever, TMHQ. But no, they're pulling our chain. The last one they listed, natural hot springs. Okay, but what's the point of that? Here's a fun fact. A couple hours south of Atlanta is a little town named Warm Springs, Georgia. Not hot springs, but close enough. Number 7, unpredictable weather, A+. Okay. Number 8, wild animals on the property are A+. Double plus if more than 1 carnivorous nocturnal animal calls it home. Now, if I say toughest mudder, and I say animals, what's the first of the Toughest Mudder venues you think of? If you went to a bunch of them, you'd probably think Canada, because Whistler had bears. Runners at Whistler were issued a bear whistle. You were not allowed to take food on the course at Whistler because of the bear threat. They had ladies walking around with dogs that were barking that would scare the bears away. Like, I didn't see any bears, but the bear threat was evidently very real. But Whistler is not within 60 miles of a major airport. They are 121 kilometers from Vancouver. 121 kilometers, which is way more than 60 miles. Like, 15 miles more. Here's the thing, though. I didn't see any animals at Whistler, or Chicago, or LA. But on my last lap at Toughest Mudder Atlanta, Ryan Atkins and I saw a deer. I was trudging along when this beautiful, graceful animal came running past me. And then we saw the deer. So where will World's Toughest 2018 be held? Probably Atlanta. Maybe Whistler. Don't forget about the ski hill at Whistler. They're talking about one badass obstacle. Of all the toughest venues, the only one that had a natural... They're trying to replace the cliff, obviously. The only one of these 6 toughest venues that had something giant like the cliff is Whistler with the ski hill. It's a ski hill that Red Bull uses for one of their quarter-mile races. It's insane. It's just a ridiculous, ridiculous ski hill. Crazy hard. Super steep. Like 40 degrees steep. But Whistler is a ski resort. And there are thousands and thousands of skiers that are probably worth more money to the resort in November than 1,500 World's Toughest Mudder runners. But do you want to hear a crazy theory? Well, you're going to hear it anyway. There are 6 Toughest Mudder races next year. The last one, the last Toughest Mudder of 2018, is in Boston on June 23rd. What if World's Toughest Mudder 2018 isn't in November, but is in July, in Whistler, with the ski hill? Let me explain. Here is how June and July 2018 lay out schedule-wise. June 2nd is Toughest Mudder Midwest. 2 weeks later, June 16th, is Toughest Mudder Scotland and Tough Mudder Whistler. 1 week later, June 23rd, Toughest Mudder Boston. Boston is the last Toughest Mudder of the year. After June 23rd, there is nothing on the Tough Mudder calendar for North America until July 14th at Tough Mudder Twin Cities. In Vegas, World's Toughest Mudder is usually 2 or 3 weeks after the regular 10-mile Tough Mudder Vegas. If that holds true for a summer World's Toughest Mudder in Whistler, then Tough Mudder Whistler would be on its previously scheduled June 16th, and World's Toughest Mudder would be June 30th or July 7th. July 7th is much more likely because Toughest Mudder Boston, June 30th only leaves 1 week between Toughest Mudder Boston and World's Toughest Mudder on June 30th, and that's just bad planning. That'd be literally 16th is Toughest Mudder Scotland, the 23rd Toughest Mudder Boston, the 30th World's Toughest Mudder. No, that's not going to happen. So if this, and I know this sounds crazy, but if they do World's Toughest Mudder in the summer, it would be July 7th in Whistler. The timeline works. Whistler meets all the criteria in the blog post. This could also be why there is no Toughest Mudder Canada this year, because they're getting World's Toughest. I'm not saying it's Whistler, but I'm not saying it's Whistler. Oh, and the Vancouver airport situation is bad, like embarrassingly bad. Ask anyone from Vancouver. It might be worse than Atlanta. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe I just have a thing with airports. Some more news. That Tougher Mudder regional race that was in Tri-State this weekend, it was streamed live on Facebook, and Coach E-Rock and Matt B. Davis were the hosts. This was the first time Tough Mudder has put this level of production into the live streaming of a race. They're going to do the same thing at Tough Mudder Carolinas, Tougher Mudder Las Vegas, and Tougher Mudder SoCal. Oh, speaking of Matt B. Davis, I wrote an article for Obstacle Racing Media about Toughest 2018. You should go read it. There's a link on our Facebook page, facebook.com/world's toughest pod. This past weekend was the OCR World Championships. There are 3 races in obstacle course racing that are considered the big race for different people. There's World's Toughest Mudder, there's the Spartan Race World Championship, and there is the OCR World Championships. As far as which one is the biggest one, it totally depends on who you ask. If you ask the guys that are hardcore Spartan, they'll look at you like you're an idiot because obviously it's the Spartan Race World Championship. If you ask the Tough Mudder guys, it's obviously World's Toughest Mudder, and those other 2 are good training races for World's Toughest Mudder. And then for a lot of people, though, OCR World Championships, it has a cool international vibe. Some people say that's the best race in OCR. As for which race is the best, there's no right answer except that World's Toughest Mudder is the best. But those are the big 3. Anyway, the OCR World Championships were this weekend, and there were a couple of familiar names on the podium. For the women, Lindsay Webster won first place in both the 3K and the 15K race. She also won both those races last year. If you don't know her, Lindsay Webster won 3 of the 6 Toughest Mudder races this year and won the Spartan Race US Championship Series. Oh, and the Spartan Race World Championship. If Lindsay wins World's Toughest Mudder for the women, she will be the reigning champion in every race that matters in the United States in obstacle course racing. She's already had a great year, but if she wins World's Toughest Mudder next month, she will have put together maybe the best year anyone's ever had in OCR. Hobie Call had an amazing 2011, I guess, when he won almost every race. But that was before anyone else knew what OCR really was. Lindsay is doing this against the best competition the Spartan has, against the best competition Tough Mudder has, and against the best international competition at the OCR World Championships. Well done, Lindsay. For the men, John Albin won first place in both the 3K and 15K races, and Ryan Atkins got second place in both the 3K and the 15K. John and Ryan were teammates last year at World's Toughest Mudder in both 2015 and 2016. Last year, they won $100,000 for winning the race and completing 100 miles together as a team. 2017, the World's Toughest Mudder is going to be great because this is going to be the first year that Atkins and Albin have raced against each other at World's Toughest Mudder. Atkins has run World's Toughest Mudder 4 times, twice in the team category, twice solo, and he's won the race every single time. John Albin is the only man in the world to consistently beat Atkins at an obstacle course race. But World's Toughest Mudder is Atkins' race. Every time they hold WTM, Tough Mudder has to pay Ryan Atkins a royalty because he owns that race. Atkins versus Albin should be the best head-to-head race we've ever seen at World's Toughest Mudder. I could literally talk about this all day. Before we talk to Darth Vader, I was re-listening to Grant Polson from last week, and this part cracked me up.
Like, oh, this bad man, he ran 4 laps this weekend, sucky.
When I talked to Grant, like when I was live with him on the phone, I didn't realize he was doing an impression of Clinton.
Sucky.
Once you realize that's supposed to be Clinton, it makes it even funnier.
Sucky.
Well done, Grant.
Sucky.
I've got good feedback on that episode 42, if you need it. Last thing before we get to the interview, let's read some iTunes reviews. This one is from Ireland. First review from Ireland by R2. Essential listening for aspiring mudders. 5 stars. If you have even a passing interest in Tough Mudder and OCR, you'll find this podcast engaging. If you're the kind of person who does Tough Mudder more than once in a day or aspire to, then you must subscribe to this. If you're thinking of taking on World's Toughest Mudder, this podcast is mandatory. End of discussion. Listening to this all the way from Ireland has not just helped me feel even more a part of an amazing community. It is full of incredible information on everything from mental and physical conditioning to how to suck less at individual obstacles. Honestly, there's more value in here than I could articulate, and it's entertaining too. Will is a really engaging host, and he has all the right guests. 5 stars. Subscribe. Thank you, R2. I appreciate the review. And from Great Britain, this by Eric27. Worth a listen. 5 stars. Easy to forget that this is a relatively new podcast. Will Hicks consistently puts out a good show with no bad episodes. Will is always interested in what his guests have to say and doesn't appear to follow a strict, scripted format, allowing the conversation to flow. A must listen if you have any interest in TM. Also keep an eye on the Facebook page because this will be updated whenever there is some TM news. Thank you, Eric27, all the way from Great Britain. Last one from the US by E. Jins. Great WTM info, 5 stars. Thank you, Will, for a great resource. All the interviews and episodes have been awesome, but the info shared by Gina and Yancey were by far the most helpful to me. Love the speculation about next season. Looking forward to pounding dirt in the desert again soon. Keep it up. By E. Jins. E. Jins, thank you very much. Eric27 and R2, you are too kind. I sincerely appreciate it. I know it's a bit of a hassle, a bit of a thing to leave a review. Very kind. Thank you much. Also, thanks to WTM Newbie Big Red and Anon123. I saw your reviews. I will read them next episode. It's not hard to leave a review, but it is kind of a deal. So, anyway, thank you guys. If you want to help make the show better, you can leave a review on iTunes too. Open the Purple Podcast app on your phone and search for Tough Mudder. Click our logo. It's the first one that pops up. Look for ratings and reviews and write a review. We need one more review from the UK to display the average on the iTunes store, and one more review from the US to reach the big 50 reviews. One more from the US to reach 50. Who will it be? It's time to talk to Darth Vader. Let's go to the phones. Darth Vader, thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Darth, tell me about your first World's Toughest Mudder.
Ooh, boy, we're going heavy here first, huh? My first World's Tough Mudder was the infamous sandstorm year of 2014, and that was a tough year for me for that particular event. I ended up breaking my leg miles, like right around mile 7 or so, with the obstacle liberator. That was the one with the pegs in the hole that you had to kind of climb up,
sure,
and then over on the backside. And like one of the pegs like fell out because it was just like too slippery, too muddy, or what have you. And I fell like all the way down to the bottom of the the obstacle and ended up breaking my leg. And had to be taken to medical, and they kind of patched me up as best as they could, and I was able to commandeer some crutches, and I ended up continuing to do an additional 13 miles after I broke my leg. So I still did all the rappelling, all the rope climbing, all the obstacles, all the bodies of water with the crutches, and with a broken leg. And the leg was broken bad enough to where when I came home, I had to have surgery immediately done on it.
How did you finish that lap?
It was probably one of the most difficult things I ever had to do.
Or just dragging it behind you?
Yeah. I mean, when I first broke it, like they came and picked me up and then took me to medical and then brought me back out again.
Okay. So that was 2014. In 2015, you didn't race World's Toughest. Is that right?
Correct.
Why
I did last year.
Tell me about 2016.
2016 was a great year. It was my heaviest race season that I had ever done up to this date. I ended up in last year being 2016. Like I ended up running a full marathon, a triathlon, 25 Tough Mudders, and 40 half marathons. So I was like just about in the best shape I could be in the condition that I was in, and dealing with a leg that had yet been amputated. So I felt really strong, and I felt really, really good. And of course, it's hard not to reflect on 2014 for the old redemption word. And I kind of like left 2014 kind of like where it was and said, hey, this is, every event that I do, it's about doing my best and not feeling like I need to go out there and prove myself against myself. But I really felt strong last year. I ended up doing 35 miles. And if I included my penalty miles, I probably would have got my brown pip. But yeah, I did 35 miles last year, which for me, that was something that like I really wanted to be out on the course for the full 24 hours. That was like one of my biggest and main goals, and to keep my pit times within like 10, 15 minutes or so. So I had like accomplished all those goals, and to be very honest with you, I was like really looking for that 25-mile patch that, I came up short from 2014. So like my like first initial, like I was like had my heart set on 25 miles. So for me to go back out there and do 2 more laps and exceed my own expectations and stuff, felt really, really satisfying. And it was very, very warm, and it wasn't as bad as it was in 2014. So the weather definitely cooperated.
To do those 35 miles, you had to get over Liberator again 6 or 7 times. How did that feel every time you came up to that obstacle?
I felt really good. I felt strong. I felt, and that's the same with all the obstacles. I had a strategy going in, and I kind of picked and choose. I actually, like, there were some times, like, for instance, last year during Stage 5 Klinger, I purposefully took the penalty on that particular obstacle because the penalty wasn't that bad, and I wanted to save my grip strength. So, most of all the obstacles are just all upper body, all hands, fingers, grip strength type things. And I'm like, I can get away with, like, for instance, skipping this obstacle every single time. And it helped when I got to like Funky Monkey, Revolution, where I was able to complete that obstacle 6 out of the 7 times. And a lot of the other obstacles, definitely helped with kind of conserving my strength through the 24-hour event.
That's something that a lot of people, the elites, like Ryan Atkins, is doing every single obstacle every time. But for guys who maybe were not on that level, that's actually a good strategy. If you want to last the full 24 hours and you want to chase that 25 or that 50 miles, there's no shame in strategically failing an obstacle or two. No. And no, I try to be realistic. I mean, I'm 6'3", and, at the time I was like 275. So I'm a little bit less than that now. I'm about 260, 265, but like I'm built like a football player. So I'm not like, a lot of these elite guys are like, like 5'7", 5'8", maybe a little bit smaller. They got like really, really lean bodies. They're all like under like 200 pounds. And so for me, it was about, like obviously I'm not keeping up with Ryan and everyone else. But like I wanted to go out there and like run my race, and running as many mutters as I have, I felt and feel, extremely confident coming up to every obstacle, because I do so many every year that I kind of know the little nuances and like the places to like grip and grab, and to kind of conserve my energy where I need to, but also like, to refer back to what, you said about what I said. Sometimes playing the strategy game when it comes to people who are non-elites, such as myself, where I'm like below average, and I kind of pick and choose to where I, like mandatory obstacles versus obstacles that the penalty is not as severe. So you mentioned running your own race. Can you talk about that? Some people get intimidated because they think, "Oh, I can't do 10 miles and get all the obstacles. I could never do World's Toughest Mudder." What does running your own race mean to you?
That's a great question. It's a person-to-person, case-by-case situation. And, like, for instance, like who I am, I run a lot of races, and I do a lot of events. But I'm not, like, a runner, So, like, it's kind of, like, hard to kind of put what I do with a lot of other people. Now, I get people who are, like, elite, great athletes that are very congratulatory to me, which is very humbling to say, hey, I can't believe you run, all these races all the time. But yet they're the ones that are going out running like 120, 125 miles a week in training runs, So, it's, having like my leg being amputated recently, for instance, you have to learn how to individually kind of know your capabilities, your strengths, your weaknesses, and, you really can't run anyone else's race. And that also is very true, for instance, when you are running a half marathon versus a full marathon. And those races are absolutely, completely two different worlds of racing. And so, like, my thought process is, for instance, when I'm running my own race, is that I've run 70 half marathons. So for me, like, a half marathon is like no big deal. Like, I can go, there's no intimidation. It's a quick race in my mind. Now you get to the full marathon. Now we're talking double the miles. And now I've only done 4 full marathons. So it shows you that, it's not as easy to accomplish a full marathon. And again, I'm sorry to go back to like running your own race. Like, if you're a 10-minute mile runner in a half marathon, you have to discipline yourself to run maybe a 12, 13, maybe 15-minute mile race when it comes to running a full marathon. So, you can't, it's unrealistic to keep the same pace that you would normally do for a half marathon for a full. Unless, of course, you train, really, really extra hard and set aside what you used to do for half marathons. But it's really based upon, it's really not the physical, it's really the mental game, in all that we do when it comes to OCR or triathlons or road races and stuff like that.
You mentioned the intimidation factor. When you go to a half marathon, it's no big deal anymore. Do you still get that when you go to a full marathon or to World's Toughest?
For me personally, I don't. But when I first started to get into like road racing, and like when you first start out, like a 5K, like 3.1 miles, can be very intimidating to anybody. But it's very doable though. You can walk 3 miles and you can get it done. And I think that the frequency and the persistence of continuously doing these races, there becomes a familiarity, and you start to like mentally like break down the race into segments, and it's easier to digest 13 miles, for instance, versus a half or a full marathon. And same thing when you're doing a 5K. And you do enough 5Ks, and it's not as intimidating anymore. So then you would say jump up to like a 10K, or you jump up to a half marathon. And you do enough half marathons, then, like, for instance, for me, I may run like maybe 2 or 3 5Ks a year. But for me, I prefer not to run them because I know that I'm better than that. So like that intimidation is gone. And same thing with running full marathons. You run enough of those, like the half marathons aren't as scary anymore. So if you really aim high, train hard, go the long distance, those shorter distances are a lot easier to not be intimidated by. It's those those races that you have not done, or the infrequency. It'd be like someone who is like specializes in doing half marathons, like I do, but yet doing a 50 miler or a 100-miler to me is very intimidating. So I think it's perspective, and how you and the frequency in which you do these races.
It's a lot of us in the world's toughest community. It's been a long time, but the first time you go to a regular Tough Mudder, it's intimidating. And the first time you go to World's Toughest, I couldn't sleep the night before my first World's Toughest. It was like when's the last time you did something for the first time? It was a scary, scary thing that first time.
Oh, absolutely. Like I remember doing, like, I did my first year. I only did 3 Tough Mudders my first year. And I got done doing my first Tough Mudder, and I felt like someone like stuffed me in like a dryer and like pushed me off a cliff. Like even though that I'm, a former Marine, and I've done all the obstacle courses, I've done all the training, I've done all these types of things, but now I'm a lot older, and now I'm on this adult playground and distance, and I'm dragging my shins over like 2x4s, and I'm getting cuts and scrapes and bruises, and I'm like looking at my arm like 3 days later, and I'm like, what happened to my arm? I don't remember banging my arm against anything. And then you're just annihilated. Like you don't even know what you're doing out there, and like how to do you're just kind of following the crowd and kind of doing what you think is whatever's necessary to get through the obstacle. And then of course the recovery, like mentally, physically, like it's a lot to kind of digest. And my second year I did 7, and I did like one kind of like every 2-3 months my first year. And then the next year I did like one, like almost one a month, because that's like kind of like all my body could handle. And then like the next year and the year after just like really exploded. Then I was like, it was about challenging myself always. So by the time I hit my 3rd year, I'm like, okay, now I'm like mentally and maybe physically ready to go ahead and do a Saturday lap and then do a Sunday lap. So
you're closing in on 100 Tough Mudder events. What number are you up to now? I just completed my 18th and 19th Mudder of the Year, and my 88th and 89th overall this past weekend from Tri-State. Of those 89, what is your favorite venue?
I love Tri-State. Tri-State is kind of like a homecoming to me, sort of speak, even though it's a venue that's about, a little over 5 hours away. And not my closest venue. But like I did my 3rd event there, my 10th event there, my 25th event there, and it was non-calculated like that. It just kind of worked out that way. And, I was like, when I did 2014, like Worlds, I was presented at Tri-State for, like free entry into the world's toughest mudder. So like, it holds like really like dear to me, like, and there's like a little bit of everything at Tri-State. There's like flat, there's like the motocross, like little mogul hills, and you got the woods, and so it's kind of like a little bit of everything. And usually, other than this past weekend, it's usually rainy, and it's usually like overcast and cold, which I kind of prefer that over the heat. So like people, that's a great question. And because a lot of people ask me that question as well, because, people know that I've done a lot of events, and I would probably definitely put Tri-State at number 1.
You mentioned all the other races you do. Why do you keep coming back to Tough Mudder?
Well, for a few reasons. At this point in this stage where I'm at, there's the numerical aspect of reaching the milestone of 100. And beyond that, it's really the relationships that is really like it's not even the glue. It's like really thick, like cement of relationships with people. And it's like running into like an old high school friend, like 20 years later, like in a different state. And it's like gives you that sense of like comfort and like, oh my God, I can't believe you're here. And I can't believe we see each other. But we're doing this almost every week. So to see like a bunch of my friends and the core group who do these 10, 15, 20 plus mudders a year, like 1 week we're in New Jersey, next week we're going to be in Missouri, week after that, North Carolina. So there's like a sense of like kind of esprit de corps, you know, there's like that sense of like, you know, and even going through the individual events themselves, like we know what we all are going through. We're being kind of battle tested on the obstacle course individually and team wise, and whether it's for ourselves or for other people. So it gives you like a sense of pride to know that I can like look across and, you know, see somebody at the start line or see somebody at an obstacle and be like, hey, we're doing this. We're you know, it's almost like, it doesn't have to be said, doesn't have to be mentioned that, you know, we know that we're putting the sacrifice in not only for the events themselves, but the travel and the time and sleeping in your vehicles and doing all those little things and opening up your travel radius. And to me, that's the biggest sacrifice. And that means you're driving, you might be working all day Friday, and then you have to drive overnight, and then you're jumping on the course. So you've been up for 24 hours before you have even done, you know, one step onto any course, whether it's a half marathon, full marathon, Tough Mudder, or anything. So imagine being up for 24 hours. Now let's go ahead and run 10 to 12 miles and 20 obstacles and like put yourself in that scenario and then do that again every weekend. It wears on you. But again, it gives you a sense of like pride and like a huge sense of accomplishment, because where I'm at numerically for Tough Mudder, the reason why I got to where I am numbers wise and people recognizing who I am is because of the frequency of doing all these events and going to different venues throughout the country.
You mentioned the numerical thing. What's it going to mean to you to hit 100?
It's a really big accomplishment. And again, like I had beforehand mentioned, it's really about the sacrifice and the friendships that you make along the way. And when you run a half marathon, it's you, the start line, the course, the finish line. That's it. There's really no friendships. You know, it's an individualized race. But when it comes to Tough Mudder, there's no pressure in time, and they encourage the camaraderie and the teamwork aspect, and also selflessly helping other people who need help, even though you may not need help yourself. So to me, that was like the biggest like attraction to Tough Mudder, was the fact that I've always have been doing these individualized like race events. And then I come to Tough Mudder and I'm like, wow, people are actually helping each other. Like in the Marine Corps, you know, we would help like, you know, the like our fire team, we wouldn't help like the whole platoon up. You know, there is a sense of like, you have to kind of like, you know, get yourself through, you know, these courses themselves. But with Tough Mudder, it's really the relationships that really is the foundation of this company. And it keeps me coming back because it's the same obstacles. It's pretty much the same set mileage. The only thing that's really different is the venue. You know, you might be at a ski resort. You might be at a flatter course, maybe in Chicago. You might have some rolling hills in, you know, Pittsburgh. But it's the friendships, you know, that make you that come back, those familiar faces.
Darth, when I first heard about you, I wondered what your real name was. And then I found out Darth Vader is your real name. Can you tell me about the name?
Sure. Of course, I get asked that quite frequently. There's really no really big backstory behind it, and really no awesome story to share for the reason why I did it. I have one child. I have a daughter, and I was adopted. So for me, my name that I carried and being adopted, there's no heritage. There was nothing, no legacy within the namesake to carry on. There was no pride. There was nothing along that correlation that made me feel this is who I am and this is my heritage or my namesake or what have you. And of course, having a daughter, if she gets married, more than likely, of course, she's going to change her name. So a few of those things kind of played in the part of saying, hey, let's go ahead, and change my name. But literally it was just you know what, I want to have some fun, and let's go ahead and change my name. And you know what, if I don't like it, I'll change to something else. But it's really just being a goof, just having some fun. And who doesn't love Darth Vader,
The Rebel Alliance?
People, oh, well, yeah. Other than those people,
Darth, you mentioned it a couple times. You recently had your left leg amputated. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. I ended up having a pretty major and significant injury when I was 23 years old. And it's just my leg and my ankle never completely healed right. I ended up having, including my amputation surgery, I ended up having 9 surgeries and literally a ton of procedures of lumbar nerve blocks and having to wear a TENS unit for years, and just physical therapy, just so many different types of things to kind of help, get me to at least where I'm walking relatively pain-free. And, all the surgeries and the procedures that I was promised by the doctors that, this time it was going to be better, and this time it's going to be significantly better than it was, prior to your last surgery or procedure. And it never happened. And so eventually after, 21, years of surgeries and procedures, I finally kind of came to the end of my rope. Decided to make the decision to have my leg amputated, which is kind of funny in a sense, because speaking of Tough Mudder, I've been doing Tough Mudder for 5-6 years, and I've been pretty much doing a lot of my road races and half marathons and triathlons and everything for the same amount of time. So people in both communities have only known me for a handful of years. So they haven't really seen me struggle for the 15 plus years, even prior to the 5 years they've seen me just struggle. So, to a lot of people, they thought this was a very impulsive and kind of radical decision that I was making. And of course, this is a bell that you can't unring. Once you cut the leg off, it's not coming back, as opposed to another arthroscopic surgery. But, to me, it was really, at this point, it was redundant, and nothing was getting done. So I really had to reassure my friends more than anything that, I was making the right decision. And again, it's hard to convince your friends that you need your leg to be amputated when just the year before you ran 67 events and 40 half marathons and 25 mudders and all these triathlons. And, it's hard to not get people to say, well, how the hell did you do all those? It seems kind of like, I don't get it, you know? It's like, well, I'm not the fastest. And, you know, you're not going to see me running an hour and a half or 2 hour half marathon. You know, I'm one of the last people to cross the finish line. And of course, people only see you during those quick snippets of like getting over the Berlin walls and getting your headbands and seeing you, you know, run across the finish line or in the beginning of a race. And, you know, they see your pictures on Instagram or Snapchat, but they don't see the 20 hours of the rest of your day. They don't see the pain that you're in. And that's with anybody. You know, all we get is like the glory shots. You know, we spend time with people during these races and you know, so yeah, some people limp and they struggle, but we don't see, you know, when the lights are turned off and people go home, you know, we're still left with those injuries and diseases and circumstances and medical, you know, situations that, you know, don't go away. So sometimes, you know, people who are dealing with, you know, those circumstances and physical limitations and stuff, it can be frustrating sometimes.
How long after the operation were you back up racing?
It's a great question. 5 weeks. I had my surgery done January 4th of this year, and 5 weeks later, I participated in my first event, which was a triathlon, and which was an absolute, like, it gave me the most therapeutic, uplifting, like, emotional high, because it gave me something to look forward to. And I know that I needed to probably be in bed and, like, rehabbing, but to me, like, doing all these races is rehab. You know, again, not only the physical, but of course for the mental disposition and my mental health and just being back out there again. So, but now to get to the race part, like, again, you know, just having my sutures removed, and I've got my leg, you know, my stump, like, wrapped in a garbage bag and, like, and duct taped up. And I've never been in a swimming pool or open bodies of water since I had my leg amputated. And my last triathlon prior to this one that I had was like 6 months prior to. So I hadn't been in any type of water other than a shower and in like 6 months. So I don't even know how to swim. I don't even know what to do. There was no swimming rehab. There was no rehab pretty much, period, because I just had my leg cut off.
Did you think about
literally? Go ahead.
Did you think about maybe starting with a 5K or something?
No.
How did it?
I literally, like, it just never, like, I'm like, I want to do the swim, I want to do a bike, I want to do a run, and that's probably where most people get frustrated with me and my close friends, because I'm stubborn and because I probably push myself a little bit too hard, too quickly. But I try to reassure them that, you know, I'm not going for time, and you know, this triathlon, for instance, was like a sprint, and they were incremented with time, so it didn't matter how fast or how slow I went. When the time, you know, passed for the allotment of time that was given, that was it. But I did really, really well with the swim. I mean, I felt weird being in the swimming pool. I mean, I literally, like, tried to, like, do the crawl and the regular stroke swimming.
Sure.
And it was like, oh my God, I can't do this because I don't have that flipper. I don't have that leg. So now I'm scrambling in my brain because I've always been a very, very good swimmer. So I'm like, I can't crawl. What do I have to do? Like, first thing was like, okay, I have to let, like, the judge who is, like, judging, like, counting my laps and stuff. Like, I have to first off ask, can I get, like, in the lane next to the wall just in case I start drowning or something, that I have something to grab onto. but I was breaststroking and like side stroking. So like I adapted like immediately to my surroundings and my environment. So like to me, that was not a non-issue until then. It was literally like you have like a wet ceramic tile swimming deck that, you know, I'm like crawling on my hands and knees. And at this point I have no prosthetic because again, I'm not even atrophied and the swelling hasn't gone down from, you know, my surgery to even, you know, get fitted for a prosthetic. So of course, like I'm asking for like a courtesy wheelchair and all these things. So I'm like, and I'm sure I'm like, you know, I've become quite the spectacle, you know, because I'm like, you know, I'm a, you know, one-legged guy that's, you know, in and out of the pool, crawling, looking like a hot mess. And then I get to the bike portion and I'm like, I haven't biked since probably months prior to my surgery. So I'm like biking with one leg and my stump is on the other side and I'm worried about falling over and then I get to the run portion and then I'm like literally like hopping on one leg and I'm crawling on my hands and knees. I'm like, and to me, it was like metaphoric. It was like a perfect setup for who I was. And it was like, no matter what, you know, your circumstance or situation, don't allow that to like define who you are. Like let your hard work, you know, define who you were. So it didn't matter what I did, but the fact that I did it mattered to me.
How did it feel crossing that finish line?
You know, I wish I could sit there and say it was emotional and I cried and, you know, all those types of things, but like I knew I could do it. I was chomping at the bit. Like I was doing laps around the hotel or not the hospital hallways and I was timing myself. Like 2 days after I had surgery, I'm using a walker and I'm timing myself laps and that I'm getting faster from the morning to the afternoon to the evening, day by day. So already, you know, even 2 days after I had my leg cut off, I'm already timing myself running laps in the hospital or hopping with a walker laps in the hospital. So like my mind had never left competing. Now I'm just doing it with, you know, missing a leg.
Just a few weeks ago, you were back in the hospital for your right leg. What happened there?
I think I ended up getting poison ivy from probably one of the Tough Mudders a few weeks prior. And since I'm always running and training, I always have like blisters on my feet. Always. Just it never goes away, you know. I'm always missing like a toenail or two toenails, just runner's foot, you know. And I don't think I was completely healed up from the poison ivy and having some open wounds and things. I think I ended up contracting some type of bacterial infection, which was later diagnosed as a staph infection. But I think I ended up contracting something, you know, when I was in the water and or in the mud at the Pittsburgh Tough Mudder. And sometimes that's going to happen. I mean, you're going to, especially with these mud runs, you know, or get bit by a mosquito or something, you know, it's just a freak situation and circumstance. And considering the fact all the races that I've done in my whole life, and to, you know, get this to happen to me, I feel pretty lucky that it's only happened once. So, but it put me in the hospital for 10 days. And leading up to that, I was bedridden for 2 days because I thought I just banged my leg really, really hard. And till, you know, there was, you know, blood in my urine and I was running a fever and, you know, finally decided to go to the hospital, being stubborn, and get to the hospital. And, you know, my blood pressure is like 77/56. My body temperature was almost 104. My body was septic, and my body was dying and was deteriorating. And I didn't know that though. And within the matter of like 2 days, like the pictures that I put on Instagram and on Facebook, the best way to describe it to people who haven't seen it, I mean, it looked like a zombie leg, right? I mean, it looked gangrene. It was like black. It was like pussy. It was red. It was just, it was like disgusting to look at. And the thought came across my mind where, I might have to get this leg amputated, because every nurse that like walked into my room was disgusted by my leg, and they all made remarks. And you would think if anybody would not make a remark, it would be like nurses have seen it all, right? Like doctors have seen it all. But when you have your doctor come in and say, "Oh my God, what happened to your leg?" It kind of discourages you a little bit. And my 8th day in the hospital, I went in for surgery. They put me out, and and pretty much in layman terms, they pretty much scraped and cut out all the skin that was infected. And then I was in the hospital for a couple more days, and then a couple more days after that, I was still in bed. So essentially for 2 weeks, I was bedridden with a pretty major infection that I thought that I was going to probably lose my leg. That was literally, this infection literally was killing me. And thankfully, with the antibiotics and all the other drugs that they were pumping into me, I survived, of course. But it was I lost a lot in my legs. Like I couldn't even walk on my prosthetic because I hadn't used it for 2 weeks. It was very, very painful. So it was like almost like learning how to walk again. My main concern was health, and then worrying about everything else was secondary.
I saw you posted recently about a possible hip replacement. Have you thought about like a different hobby, like crosswords or whittling or something?
Yes. There will come a point, and just like with all the athletics that I have done, even prior to running and prior to Tough Mudders, there comes a point where you can't compete anymore. And I'm okay with, I'm not that stubborn. I'm stubborn a lot, but not like too stubborn. But I know there will become a time that, and 100 is a big number too. That's definitely in the forefront. It definitely takes a toll on the body, and my hip hurts, and because there's a lot of weight distribution and compensation, being on the different types of prosthetics that I wear, and of course learning how to walk as a new amputee. And then of course I'm out there competing with people who are half my age easily, because I'm almost 46 years old, and I'm still out there trying to, do the same course and participate and rub elbows and shoulders with guys and women who are, 22, 24, years of age. And of course, there's a group of us guys that are out there that are, older and, older than I am, that are out there that are competing as well. But the frequency, though, is definitely a grind. But at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, I want to feel like I left it all out on the course. And I want to be able to reflect on the relationships, the venues, the headbands that I earned, all the people that I met, those relationships that have carried on well beyond Tough Mudder and off the course. Like, to me, that's what it's all about. I want to be able to look back and say, I gave it my all, and that's it. And then I'll bow out. But as long as I can keep grinding, and as long as I can still, feel like I'm not impeding Tough Mudder from shutting the course down that day, and I have to keep the floodlights on, to make sure I cross the finish line, I'm going to keep going, It's important for me.
You've been on a few TV shows. One of those was on the CW called My Last Days. Can you tell me about that?
Correct. Sure. It was a documentary series, and pretty much it documented a handful of people's stories from across the country who is living with life-altering and kind of incurable diseases. Like, for instance, for myself, I've been living with cancer for almost 16 years. And I've gone through, 15 cycles of chemotherapy and tons of drugs to keep me alive, and constant monthly blood work that I have to get done at the hospital, as well as being put on the bone marrow transplant list. So that was the reason why. Actually, I was founded through my Instagram by one of the producers of the show. So it was very humbling, and it was a great experience for them to choose me out of, potentially thousands of applicants, which I never even applied for, to be able to share my story. And because of the fact that I feel that I'm pretty open about, my situation and being diagnosed with cancer and still continuously living with it today, as well as dealing with other things in my past, and of course, my recent, leg amputation surgery, I felt like a pretty good ambassador to be able to be open about some of the things that I've had to overcome with my life, but to live concurrently. And to me, that's the most important thing, is that in life in general, regardless of the cross you have to bear, you can't hold yourself hostage by those diseases, aches, pains. You have to try to continuously live your life while you are battling those demons or those cancers and everything else. So to me, it was therapeutic, to be able to not only have my word and my story be told and heard, but also it was good for me too to be able to share my story. And they also just recently, within the last 3 months, they did a follow-up. So they'll be doing a follow-up story with me as well, with the second season of My Last Days from the CW.
You mentioned your daughter earlier. Tell me about your daughter. What does she think of all this Tough Mudder stuff?
My daughter, she's a 3-time Tough Mudder. She loves it. She, to a certain degree, she loves it for what it represents, for what it is, for what it's done for me, and for the opportunity that it's given for other people as well. Because again, it's not just a race, but a challenge, and it was certainly a challenge for her as well. I keep going back to Tough Mudder. It's very easy to. She just recently graduated college with a business degree. She's 22, and she works 2 jobs, and she's very independent, and she's an amazing young woman who's very thoughtful, very respectful, very caring, and just an overall great person. And I couldn't be more proud of the type of person that she is and the type of person she's turned out to be. So it makes me, she'll say I'm the greatest dad in the world, which of course I am. But it's easy when you have like an amazing child that is selfless and caring and giving and all those other, amazing attributes. It's easy to be the person that you are when you are complimented so well by having a great child.
Darth, do you have any sponsors you're working with, or is there anything you'd like to plug?
At this point right now, I always am very considerate and thankful for Tough Mudder, because during my CW special, Tough Mudder presented me with a lifetime pass. and that has helped me immensely financially. And so, and also, aside from Tough Mudder and all that they've done and the emails and the pictures and everything that they put on there, which is very humbling, and it feels good to be recognized for your hard work, but also my friends in the Tough Mudder and running community, who have been very supportive, who have reached out to me in message, in text, in phone calls, and people who have contributed financially, whether it was, a few dollars or several $100s, who have contributed towards my leg amputation surgery, and people who have contributed to my GoFundMe page for my bone marrow transplant. And people who I've never met before, those are the people that, I want to thank and plug, because, I wouldn't be where I'm at without the support, not only the financial, aspect of it, but also, to have the support of, people who are there unconditionally, regardless of what you're going through. To me, that's, those are the real heroes. Those are the people who are, make it easier for people like myself to be able to do what I do. And I can't do and wouldn't be able to do what I do without the help and support of my friends and people that I have never met before, but have heard a little bit about who I was and what I've done.
Darth Vader, any last thoughts on Tough Mudder or World's Toughest Mudder?
I'm excited for this year. I had a little bit of big aspirations prior to my last surgery a couple weeks ago, but I just want to do my best this year at Worlds. I know my physical limitations, especially just going through this, this bacterial infection, that I've been battling. I just want to go out there and be safe and respect the course as always, and do my best, in which I feel that every time I go out there, I try to be, the ambassador of not quitting and not giving up and doing your best, your true best.
Special thank you to Darth Vader for appearing in this episode. Well done, Darth. I appreciate it. Guys, it is getting close. Less than 1 month to World's Toughest Mudder 2017. I cannot wait to be out there with you. How many miles are you shooting for this year? Let me know. willhicks@gmail.com. Call your shot beforehand. In that Road to World's Toughest Mudder video on Amazon that I mentioned earlier with Ryan Atkins and Lindsay Webster, Lindsay says her goal this year is only 80 miles. I say only. That's like a 2-hour drive in Canada or in my Mazda B2000 pickup. Let me know what you're shooting for this year at willhicks@gmail.com. Don't forget to leave a review on iTunes. Thanks a lot, you guys.